Storm Fleet Warnings is a short story in the Hasbro short story collection written by Jude Watson and presented by Scholastic. It details the Storm Fleet and the Battle of the Lawn Nebulae. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were returning from a mission, heading back to the temple by way of the Lawn Nebulae. As they approached the Kronex spaceport, they had to reduce speed to minimum levels. Anakin drummed his fingers on the pilot's seat. There was nothing worse than piloting an ultra-tweaked starfighter and having to go slow. Ahead, 3 stray asteroids bounced on a wave of atmospheric disturbance. Anakin pushed the throttle. He had only seconds before the asteroids were suddenly in front of him, careening crazily. He cut to the left, avoiding the first one, then zoomed right, just missing the second. Then he flipped over for a screaming dive and made a hard right for open space, missing the last asteroid by a comfortable 20 meters. Within seconds his master had drawn his own starfighter level with Anakin's. Obi-Wan had given the asteroids a wide berth, exactly what he was supposed to do. The comm unit crackled with his master's dry tone. You could have gone around them. It was faster to go through them. Ah. And what do you know about the Lawn Nebulae, my young apprentice? Obi-Wan prodded. Smaller cruisers are advised to proceed at minimum velocity. Atmospheric waves can appear without warning, Anakin said dutifully. And yet you decided to play chase the asteroid, Obi-Wan said sternly. You're too old for these childish games. Anakin pressed his lips together. He couldn't explain to his master that for him, testing his skills wasn't a childish game. It was a necessary release. There was a wall between them now. He had done things he could not tell Obi-Wan. He knew things he could not say. The Clone Wars had ripped the galaxy apart. Times were difficult for all the Jedi, but Anakin knew he felt the darkness more than most. It was like a physical presence. It was as though he carried the weight of it in his body. And so he pushed the darkness away with what had always helped him forget in the past. Speed. Physical training. His Jedi path. Anakin glanced at his instruments and was suddenly alert. Ships were approaching from the rear. The skirmishes of the Clone Wars had reached every corner of the galaxy. It was always wise to check out your neighbors. Looks like large transports behind us, Anakin said. Unusual for such a large fleet to be traveling in such close formation, Obi-Wan observed. Anakin flipped over in a fast roll, and Obi-Wan followed. They split up and paced the 3 asteroids, keeping them between their starships and the fleet. Anakin watched the first line of ships approach. They were huge, sheathed in dull black durasteel and advanced weaponry. That wasn't unusual these days. Even bulk freighters had to arm themselves now. But these transports were too well designed to be bulk freighters, Anakin realized. It wasn't obvious unless you studied the lines of the ship and the quality of the fittings. They look like they could be from the Quat drive yards, Anakin said. The proportions and the lines of the design. Look at the plating on the underside, Obi-Wan said. Something is odd about it. Anakin followed the lines of the plating. His master was right. Something was off. It took him several seconds to figure it out. The Quat drive yards. It must be the Storm Fleet, Anakin said. The Jedi had recently learned that the Separatists had secretly put in an order for a heavily armored fleet of attack ships. Disguised as freighters so that they could travel secretly through the galaxy, they were actually outfitted with so much firepower that smaller planets were completely defenseless against them. The Jedi hung back while the transports landed at the spaceport. Then they cummed for clearance and docked at a landing bay close by. We'll never get in to investigate without a battle, Obi-Wan said, surveying the area quickly. I've been to this spaceport with Kagan long ago. He has a friend who works here. A mechanic. He ended up here after a brilliant career on the Senate Elite Security Team. He'll be able to help us. Should we head to the mechanic shop, then? Anakin asked. A small smile flickered on Obi-Wan's face as he shook his head. The cantina. Kronex was so large that it had a variety of cantinas. Obi-Wan chose the darkest and noisiest. A large holosign outside with missing letters proclaimed, "Check Wep NS at DOR," but Anakin could see with one glance at the holstered blasters and vibroshivs tucked in belts that the directive was ignored by the clientele. In a corner a tall being sat, an ale in front of him on the table. He wore a grimy scarf around his head, and his 10-fingered hands were permanently stained with grease. Large pouches underneath his hooded eyes gave him a sad air. He was so still he appeared to be almost asleep. "That's your contact?" Anakin asked dubiously. Obi-Wan and Anakin sat down at his table. "Can I buy you another?" Obi-Wan asked, indicating his mug of ale. "Thank you, stranger, but 2 is my limit," the being said. His tone was friendly, but his sleepy eyes examined the 2 Jedi suspiciously. "I don't remember you ever having limits, Fizz," Obi-Wan said. Shaggy gray eyebrows rose. The movement seemed to cost the being a great deal of effort. "Everything changes. Everything goes. Including my memory. Do I know you?" "We've met," Obi-Wan said. "Perhaps you remember my master, Qui-Gon Jinn." The being blinked twice, which for him was a substantial reaction. "Qui-Gon Jinn," he said slowly. "The best of the best." He heaved a sigh. "Gone now, like the best of them are. You must be Obi-Wan. You've grown up, I see. And you need a favor, no doubt." "A large fleet just landed in docking bays 1211 through 1222, Obi-Wan said. "We'd like to know where they're going. And we don't want it known the Jedi are asking questions." "I like that kind of favor. I don't even need to move." He took a small data pad from his pocket, checked it, and frowned. "No data. That means they have special clearance. But if you can't go in the front door, try the back." He pushed away his glass and stood. "Come with me." Fizz used his security card to get them into the service area. There, massive tanks pumped fuel to the receiving stations. With a wave at a fellow mechanic, Fizz used his card to access the control board. Quickly he punched in several numbers. "That should do it." Fizz ambled toward the door that opened onto the hangar. "The fuel gauge will tell them something's wrong, and they'll call a mechanic." The Jedi watched as Fizz grabbed a hydrospanner and approached the guard standing by the ramp. Fizz waved his arms. The guard checked a data pad at his waist belt. Fizz pointed to the ship, but the guard shook his head. "He won't let him board," Anakin said. "Let's go." "Wait," Obi-Wan ordered. The guard reached for a comlink. Fizz began to argue and, in a gesture so graceful it almost looked tender, reached out and tapped the guard behind the ear with the hydrospanner. The guard slumped to the floor. Fizz didn't hesitate. With a surprising display of speed and strength, he leaped over the guard and raced up the ramp. They counted off the seconds and Fizz reappeared. He streaked down the ramp, leaped over the guard again, accessed the service door, and grinned at them. "The fleet is headed for the cipher system," Fizz said. "But I don't know why." "I do," Obi-Wan said grimly. "So why are the Jedi so interested in bulk freighters?" Fizz asked. Then he held up a hand. "Don't tell me." "Perhaps one day we will need your help again," Obi-Wan said. "No offense, young Obi-Wan," Fizz said. "But I hope you do not ask. I intend to wait out the Clone Wars in the cantina." They left Fizz at the entrance to the cantina and headed back to their starfighters. "What is Cipher, Master?" Anakin asked. "A small but strategically located planet in the Midrim," Obi-Wan answered. "A coalition of separatists is there right now, negotiating to establish a base. At least the separatists are calling it negotiation. Threats are more like it." So the fleet will orbit Cypher during the talks in order to intimidate them, Anakin said. Cypher will fear an invasion if they don't comply. I'm afraid that looks like the plan, Obi-Wan said. We must follow the Storm Fleet, Anakin declared. Obi-Wan shook his head. And do what? We can't just let them go. We will notify the Temple of what we have learned, Obi-Wan said. They'll alert the Republic and try to send ships. You know we are stretched thin, Anakin said. Most likely there won't be ships to send. And we are here, now. This is one small battle in a very large war, Anakin, Obi-Wan said. The Council needs us for other things. Anakin set his jaw stubbornly. And that is all right with you? No, Obi-Wan said. But I can't see another way at the moment. A roar filled the air. They're taking off. Anakin cried, then raced to his starfighter's docking bay and leaped into the cockpit. He saw Obi-Wan dashing to his own starfighter. Anakin took off and was followed by Obi-Wan into the stratosphere. Obi-Wan's voice came over the comm unit. I hope you have a plan. Just contact the temple, Anakin said. I'll do the rest. Within minutes, the Storm Fleet was in sight. Anakin zigzagged in and out of the formation. He was so close he could count the rivets on the front panels. Identify yourself, a voice came over the comm. Anakin did a quick roll, then zoomed under the belly of a ship to come up next to another. He flew between the two massive ships, darting in and out. Suddenly, the fleet changed direction slightly. That was a good sign. He was getting to them. Anakin dropped back and slowed his speed. 3 of the ships peeled off from the formation. They executed a surprisingly sharp turn, considering their size. Anakin took a moment to admire their maneuverability before he noticed that the armor plating was rolling back. Anything to say now? Obi-Wan asked. Oops. Anakin said. The first fire from the laser cannons hit empty space as Anakin and Obi-Wan simultaneously went into a steep dive. The ships followed. The shock waves of the weapon's fire caused his starfighter to dance. Anakin turned sharply to the left. Obi-Wan turned to the right. The laser cannons blasted again, missing them by a few meters. Proton torpedoes coming up, Obi-Wan said tersely. The torpedoes locked onto the starfighters. Anakin pushed the ship into a steep dive, then veered left. The torpedoes missed him by 2 meters. Close. More torpedoes on the left. Anakin, watch out. Anakin kept the starfighter in the same arc but pushed the nose down. He could feel the controls shudder. He was really pushing the engines now. The blast almost threw him to the floor. Anakin grabbed the controls. He checked his warning lights. All clear, then a red light began to blink. I've been hit. They got my stabilizer, he told Obi-Wan. They both knew what that meant. Without a horizontal stabilizer, he wouldn't be able to maneuver. A series of chirps came through the comm as his astromech droid tried to fix the problem. Anakin pulled up. Laser cannon fire thundered past his flank. Obi-Wan darted ahead of him, trying to draw the fire, giving the droid time to finish. Anakin called on the Force, reaching out for it to make his decisions fluid. Anakin, you're pushing it, Obi-Wan shouted. I can see your stabilizers shaking. His droid beeped. The warning lights blinked off, and Anakin felt the ship's movement smooth underneath his hands. We've got to get out of here, Obi-Wan said. We can't outrun them. And firing at them would be like pelting them with pebbles. Anakin studied his NAV screen. There's an asteroid storm up ahead, coming up fast. I say we fly right into it. With any luck it will be too late for them to avoid it. If Anakin had longed for a chance to put his starfighter through its paces, he'd found it. Asteroids careened crazily around him. Engines screaming, he shaved off centimeters from close encounters, pushing the ship to its limit. He could not use his instruments. He could only use the force. Sweat beaded up on his forehead. It was too late for the storm fleet to turn. They blundered into the storm. Asteroids bounced off the surfaces of the ships harmlessly. But even a capital ship wouldn't be able to survive an impact with a large asteroid. Anakin saw the first ship begin to turn to retreat. He changed direction and came directly at the disguised freighter, firing his laser cannons. The ship stopped its slow turn and reversed, firing at Anakin. Anakin dived, heading straight for the massive asteroid ahead of him. The force hummed around him as he swerved at the last possible second. The enemy ship behind him hit the asteroid head-on. Chunks of debris flew his way. More obstacles. He could see Obi-Wan spinning away, diving away from the wreckage. Anakin was too far in to make the same maneuver. He pushed his nose up and climbed. He felt debris knock the ship, but with a quick glance at the instruments he saw that it hadn't been damaged. Another explosion sent shock waves against the starfighter. The second freighter had been caught by the debris. Smoking and flaming, it spiraled down out of sight. Anakin saw clear space ahead. With a last surge of speed, he avoided the last asteroid and sailed into the open atmosphere. A moment later, he saw Obi-Wan over to his left. "Wouldn't want to do that again," Obi-Wan said. "At least we knocked out 2 of the freighters," Anakin said. "That will slow them down in time for the Republic fleet to get to Cypher." "We were lucky." This time Anakin didn't argue. "Yes. Let's set our course for the temple," Obi-Wan said. "And hope for a dull trip." Their starfighters moved gracefully toward their waiting hyperspace rings. Had it been luck? He wondered. Or the Force? Obi-Wan was so good at so many things. He could inspire loyalty. Shift strategies in a heartbeat. Fight harder than any Jedi Anakin had seen. Yet did he trust the Force enough? If they were truly able to use the Force at its maximum potential, opposition would be nothing. They could destroy enemies. They could claim the galaxy for peace. "You can't do everything, Anakin," Obi-Wan said suddenly, as if he was reading his apprentice's mind. "You must choose the battles to fight." Anakin wanted to fight them all. He wanted to do everything. And he knew he could. Thank you for using Lit Era Reader. Stay up to date with our latest news and project events. Duel is a short story in the Hasbro Short Story Collection by Timothy Zahn. Duel is offered as a free download on StarWars.com. The battle for this part of the city was over. The Republic's forces had lost. They had lost very badly. Commander Brolis woke suddenly from his uneasy sleep as the proximity alarm buzzed, his hands fumbling for his DC-15 blaster rifle. Wincing at the pain in his side, he raised his head from his chest and peered out through one of the gaping holes in the wall of the ruined building he'd taken refuge in. The day had given way to early evening while he dozed. But with the remaining daylight, the glow of the fires blazing elsewhere in the city, and the weapons flashes from the battles still raging in the distance, there was more than enough light to see the squad of battle droids making their way across the remains of the town square toward him. With a grunt of pain, Brolis forced himself to his feet. On one level, it seemed complete waste of time, both for the droids to keep attacking and for him to keep fighting them off. His entire force was dead now, the last 2 squads whittled away, as they waited here in this ruined building for the reinforcements that had never arrived. It was just a matter of time, he knew, before they got him, too. Except that they didn't want him dead. They wanted him alive, and they wanted him badly enough to keep sending in battle droids, hoping to catch him napping. Not this time, though. As long as he had a charged blaster and the ability to pull trigger, he would continue to litter the ground with scorched droid parts. A slight movement across the square behind the battle droids caught his eye, and Broly grimaced. Eventually, of course, they would get tired of wasting droids and decide to end the game once and for all. And when they did, they had the ultimate game ender waiting in the shadows, a Hailfire droid, towering over the rubble on its two massive hoop wheels, its twin missile launcher pods pointing idly in his direction. This particular droid had been fitted with the lower-strength anti-personnel missiles, he knew, so that it could take out the troopers without bringing the whole city down on top of it. Just the same, a single one of those missiles through the wall, and it would be all over. But until then, Broly had work to do. Hoisting the blaster rifle to his shoulder, he centered his sights on the first battle droid. "Your weapon put away." Broly spun around, nearly losing his balance in his haste. The gruff voice had come from behind him, where there was nothing but rubble from the row of buildings that had been destroyed in the earlier fighting. This had to be some kind of trick. If it was a very good one. The creature standing there was short, with green skin, large eyes, and even larger ears. Leaning on a gnarled walking stick, he was dressed in the kind of simple robe worn by lower-class beings all across the Republic. And somehow, he seemed familiar. "Commander Broly, you are?" the creature asked. "Yes," Broly said, frowning. "Who are you?" "The reinforcements you requested, I am," the creature said dryly. "Tell me, into the fortress of Axion, you have penetrated." Broly grimaced. This was his reinforcements. Briefly, he confirmed. "That's why the separatists out there want me alive. They want to find out how we got in so they can plug that hole in their defenses." "Indeed." The creature smiled, his long ears flattening as he did so. "For that same reason do we also wish you alive. That is why I am here." He lifted his stick and pointed to the opening. "Aside, stand you. Deal with the droids, I will." Without waiting for permission, he hobbled forward. Broly watched, his brain too frozen with bewilderment and the pain of his injuries to try to stop him. The creature paused just outside the gap, letting his stick drop to the ground and reaching a three-fingered hand in front of him. There was a flicker of motion, and a small cylinder seemed to jump into it from beneath his robe. And with a snap hiss, a brilliant green blade blazed into existence. Broly caught his breath as the memory finally clicked. Kamino, the embarkation of the Republic's clone army, a small creature distantly seen across the ordered ranks as he led the troops into the transports. Reinforcements, indeed. This was Jedi Master Yoda himself. Perhaps the approaching battle droids recognized him, too, or perhaps it was the sight of the lightsaber that turned their stealthy approach into a sudden full-fledged attack. But if they were hoping to overwhelm him with numbers, their strategy was a failure. Yoda never moved from the spot where he had planted himself, his swirling lightsaber blade deflecting away every one of the storm of blaster bolts coming toward him. Some of the shots ricocheted across the square to impact the ruins on the far side, but most reflected straight back to the droids themselves, shattering them into scrap metal. Half a minute later, it was over. Broly blinked in amazement, wondering if it was always that easy for Jedi. And then, across the square, the Hailfire droid stirred and began to roll forward. "Look out!" Broly called. "There's a dash." The rest of his warning dissolved into a fit of painful coughing. But Yoda was already angling across the square away from him, lightsaber held ready as he slipped from one pile of debris to another. The Hailfire shifted direction toward the small Jedi Master, swiveling to keep its missile launchers trained on him. And then, midway between two stacks of rubble, Yoda stopped, facing the droid as if challenging it to a private duel. The droid stopped too, and for a moment they seemed to be regarding each other. Then, almost delicately, the droid lowered its pods and sent a single missile sizzling through the air. Then, almost delicately, the droid lowered its pods and sent a single missile sizzling through the air. Broly tensed, watching helplessly as the rocket streaked across the open space. Jedi lightsabers, he knew, could defend quite well against the bolts from blasters or plasma weapons. But trying to block a missile that way would merely cause it to explode. If Yoda didn't do something fast, he was going to die. Then, just as it seemed there was no chance left, Yoda leaped almost casually to the side. The rocket burned through the space he'd just vacated, exploding harmlessly a dozen meters behind him. From somewhere deep inside the Hailfire droid came an annoyed-sounding rumble, the first time Broly's had ever heard one make a noise like that. For a second or two it seemed to be pondering its next move. Then, in rapid succession, 3 more missiles burst outward, angling into a tight spread as they flew. Yoda was ready. He leaped back toward his earlier position to let the first pass by, dropped flat onto the ground as the second shot over his head, then rolled and bounded upward in time to avoid the third. He landed on the ground, lifted his lightsaber again to ready position, and waited. Broly strained his ears, listening for a clue as to what the droid would do. And then, over the distance, he heard a series of calibration clicks. "Tracking lock," he shouted toward Yoda. His lungs heaved with a fresh coughing fit, and he could only hope the other had caught his warning. By activating the tracking system, the droid was setting its missiles to follow their target no matter what. Yoda's only hope now was to find cover before the missiles got a clean lock onto him. But he remained where he was, waiting. Lowering its launchers again, the droid fired. Again, Yoda leaped upward as the missile approached. But this time something was different. Instead of simply arcing into the air, he twisted his body into a dizzying set of spins, twisting back and forth like a gymnast performing a complicated aerial routine. The effect on the missile was startling. It seemed to tremble as it flew, its nose shaking back and forth as if thoroughly confused. It shot past Yoda, still shaking, and continued on to explode across the square. Broly grinned tightly. It was the same sort of evasive jinking maneuver he'd seen starfighter pilots perform in order to shake off a target-locked missile. He'd never guessed that any being, even a Jedi Master, could duplicate such a technique on his own. Neither, apparently, had the droid. Another growl rumbled across the square, and then, suddenly, it was rolling forward, filling the air with a fresh stream of missiles as it charged. Yoda was already in motion, leaping and spinning, hitting the ground and bounding off again at unexpected angles, making himself an impossible target for even a Hailfire's weaponry to tag. Broly found himself wincing as missile after missile slipped harmlessly past the Jedi Master, shaking the ground and lighting up the square with distant detonations. One of the missiles, which looked like it couldn't possibly miss, somehow bent aside from its path just far enough to collide with another of the salvo, detonating both midway between Yoda and the droid. And as that premature explosion momentarily blocked the droid's view, Yoda abruptly switched from defense to attack. He hurled his lightsaber toward the machine, the weapon spinning into the obscuring cloud of smoke from the missile's collision and shooting out the other side. But the intended target was no longer there. Even as the missiles had collided, the droid had skidded to a halt and reversed direction to roll rapidly backward across the square. The lightsaber blade sliced through the space where it had been, and as the weapon hesitated in midair, the droid fired another missile straight at it. At the last second, the lightsaber dodged out of its way, streaking back to safety in Yoda's hand. The missile itself shot harmlessly past to add yet another crater to the distant landscape. With that the barrage ceased. For a few seconds Yoda and the droid again seemed to be staring at each other. Then, moving swiftly but warily, Yoda retraced his steps back to the broken building. "It just let you walk away?" Broly asked, not quite believing it. "Clever this Hailfire droid is," Yoda huffed as he stepped in through the opening and retrieved his walking stick. "Close enough to engage it in direct battle, it will not allow me. Nor in futile attacks will it expend all of its missiles. That is why it has stopped now, the situation further to assess." "So what do we do?" Broly asked. Yoda's ears flattened. "Allow it to destroy itself, we must," he said, closing down his lightsaber and gesturing behind Broly. "Come." Brolis hadn't been to the rear of the ruined building for 3 days, not since he'd confirmed that there was no escape route there for him and his squad. He walked now past the scattered bodies of his troops, fighting against the pain of his injuries, wondering what exactly the Jedi Master had in mind. He soon found out. Where once had been merely stacks of collapsed wall and ceiling material, there was now a small, Yoda-sized tunnel stretching back through the rubble. So that was how the other had appeared so unexpectedly behind him. A series of large caverns there are, in the cliffs behind this part of the city, Yoda said. Beyond them, my transport is. Yes, I know about the caverns, Brolis said, frowning. The Jedi had stopped beside the entrance to the tunnel, and was looking back at him. I'm not sure I'm up to crawling that far, Brolis warned him, eyeing the tunnel. My side dash, he broke off as, suddenly, he found himself rising gently off the floor, turning over in midair, and floating headfirst toward the tunnel. But the caverns have no other exit, he added, determined not to show surprise or panic in front of this creature half his size, so we decided they were of no strategic use to us. He frowned as he was deftly threaded into the narrow tunnel. Or is there a way out that I don't know about? There is no way out, Yoda confirmed as they moved together down the tunnel. Through the side of the collapsed building, I came. But the droid will not know that. The tunnel was suddenly rocked by a terrific explosion from behind them. The piles of debris they were traveling through shook violently, the pressure wave sending a fresh surge of pain through Brolis's injuries. What was that? He gasped. The Hailfire droid, it is, Yoda said, his voice sounding faint and distant through the pounding of the blood in Brolis's ears. No longer, I fear, does it wish to take you alive. Now, I believe, it will be coming to kill. Another blast shook the tunnel. This time, as the shock wave washed over him, Brolis fell again into darkness. He awoke to find himself lying beside a boulder, staring upward at a distant and dimly lit ceiling of rock. Rolling over carefully, he got up onto his knees and eased his eyes above the boulder. He was in a vast, dome-shaped cavern, one of the group Yoda had mentioned just before the Hailfire droid had attacked. Scattered around the floor were a handful of glow sticks, enough to show the Jedi Master standing by the cavern's side. He was slicing into the wall with his lightsaber beneath a wide band of rock that stretched up along the curved wall to the ceiling, and down the other side, forming a sort of rough arch in the center of the cavern. Brolis frowned up at the formation. He didn't remember any arch being there when he'd explored these caverns 2 weeks ago. Could his eyes be playing tricks on him? He stiffened. Above the lightsaber's hum he could hear another sound, the creaking wheels of an approaching Hailfire droid. Which meant Yoda's plan had failed. Obviously, he'd hoped the droid would try to follow them, and get itself stuck in the collapsed buildings long enough for him to cut an exit through the cavern wall. But with persistence and probably a few carefully placed missiles, the droid had managed to batter its way through the rubble, enlarge the entrance to the caverns, and chase them down. It was approaching now. And they were trapped. Yoda heard the sound, too. Closing down his lightsaber, he leaped across the cavern to land beside Brolis's boulder. Awake you are, the Jedi said. Good. Be silent, now, and observe. Across the cavern, the Hailfire rolled into view. Its cyclopean photoreceptor eye spotted Yoda at once, and it swiveled to face him. Missile pods aimed and ready, it continued forward. It had reached the center of the cavern when, from beside the two ends of the stone arch, a pair of clone troopers suddenly rose from concealment behind boulders and opened fire. Brolis's mouth dropped open in disbelief as the blaster fire raked across the droid. But his troops had all been killed in the fighting. Where in the world had Yoda found these men? The droid responded instantly to the sudden new threat. Swiveling hard to its right, it fired a missile at the clone trooper there, then rotated to face the opposite direction and launched another at the second trooper. The missiles hit their target's dead center and exploded. With a horrendous double crack, the bottom sections of the arch blew apart. Shock waves raced upward along the walls, shattering the arch into twin waterfalls of falling stone. The waves reached the top of the dome, and with a roar the rest of the arch and the entire center of the ceiling collapsed, burying the Hailfire droid beneath a massive pile of rock. And Broly's finally understood. There had been no soldiers, merely empty sets of armor animated by the same mysterious power that had earlier carried him through the tunnel. Yoda hadn't been trying to cut an exit with his lightsaber, but had instead been putting the finishing touches on a booby trap of loosened rock that he knew would collapse under the droid's attack. Just as he had promised, he had allowed the Hailfire to destroy itself. "Come, Commander," the Jedi Master said quietly. "Await us, my transport does. Thank you for using Lit Era Reader."